putting work in front of people is very, very difficult. And then obviously, having a class and saying you have to do this assignment, I'm going to grade you on it. Like that is a scenario that can result in something that's not great. And then what we're trying to do is blow their minds.
Michael Curtin, thanks so much for coming today to talk about your Game Studies and Design course, which new and developed around concept art. And it's just such a cool class. If I was a student, I'd go back in time and take the class.
Me too, exactly. And that's why I made it. No, I was a student here. I was an art and design student here a million years ago. And I loved video games and I loved drawing, and there was nothing to marry the two. And I had the opportunity to make the class that I would have died for when I was 19 years old.
We should maybe back up and remind people what's so cool about concept art. I was just watching
what is concept art?
The
That's
Star
a
Wars
question.
Origin of where Han Solo's ship came from. I mean, and so concept art is, I know it from more cinema, where that's the picture, drawing, sketch, painting that started this thing in the movies that everybody becomes iconic later. And this concept art is from your history of video game production, right?
Concept art is anytime you need to design something that doesn't already exist. So if you're doing a period piece and it's the 1970s, you don't ask yourself, well, what do 1970s clothes look like, and then draw them and then hire a seamstress to make. No, you just go buy a bunch of clothes from the 1970s. But if you're making anything that you need to come up with something new, you need someone to design that. And drawing is a incredibly fast way to burn through ideas. Yeah. And that's what concept artists need to do. They need to put a world at the fingertips of the cinematographers or the directors, or in the case of video games, the game designers and the writers and everyone else, and they need to efficiently create a world. And that is where concept art is this stunning, bizarre mix of skill sets that really feeds into the interdisciplinary nature of game studies and design here at the U of I, because the U of I is a gigantic ecosystem that has everything you can imagine, from bug collections to material libraries to gardens you can go visit. I mean, it is an amazing opportunity for an artist who needs to design an entire world to go just interact with things, to go look at things, touch things, figure things out for themselves, and then represent those things in a new way on paper.
No, I love that. I had never, I mean, that's brilliant. I think the other thing cool about this course is you're kind of part of this inaugural Game Studies and Design minor and major and all the stuff that's just happening. It's new to our campus. I saw that Game Studies and Design has like 10 courses, I think, this semester. But talk a little bit about the origin story of how your course fit in with this new program.
I worked at Volition, and a man named Dan Cermak was my VP while he was there. And then he transitioned over into Game Studies and Design when Professor Judith Bintar got the program up and running. He is familiar with my work. I meet with Dan every once in a while, and at a certain point, Judith reached out and said, we need art classes. And there was a lot of back and forth about what that meant. Should that live at Art and Design? And finally, with me, they basically said, we would like you to pursue what you think would be valuable. My experience in video games was a tremendous amount of folks on the visual side got into video games because of their interest in concept art. Yeah. Everyone draws. Yeah. And they diversified at some point because even a big studio might only need like 3 concept artists, but they need an army of things like environment artists. I mean, I would be on environment art teams where we'd have 25 employees or more. And that was just for one project. So people often go where the need is at, particularly if they're starting out in the industry, but everyone had this through line that they love to draw. They would go on their lunch hour and they would get together and they would just get sketch pads out. And that skill set, being able to dig into an idea and represent it visually and know how that fits into a game, is what drew me to the class. And I pitched it to Judith, and she said, give it a shot. Yeah. And then I started calling everyone I knew in the industry and calling in every favor I had to walk me through what their common experience of people who were new to the industry was. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we really put our heads together and tried to basically say, what can we do for students to help them get hired in the form of help them develop a portfolio, but also get them through their first day in a studio. Mm-hmm. Because crossing that line into suddenly being in that environment and people are just looking at you and expecting you to do the job is startling. And if we can get them there and let them kind of be themselves and retain what makes them valuable to that studio through that experience, then we will have actually achieved something.
Yeah. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about the secret sauce of your course. And so I'm putting on my pedagogical hat. We're at the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, which means, I think there's something kind of neat about your class pedagogically and the way you've set it up. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it helps that I am not a trained teacher, which I am not, and it also helps that I have one class. And that is a very unique position compared to a full-time faculty member who has a tremendous amount of responsibilities, who is teaching 4 or 5 classes or even more. So I'm extremely lucky that I had this opportunity. Also, I got to make the whole thing. So this wasn't something where I had inherited a class and I had to stick to a certain rigorous amount of requirements. This was something where I could approach it and make it whole. So what I did was I started at the end. We basically tried to figure out what we wanted students to leave the course with and worked backwards. So what the challenge of going and saying we want students to develop a cohesive body of work is if you go to a bunch of students and you point to them and say, we need you to make a bunch of art, and you get to draw whatever you want, then several bad things happen. They stick to what, particularly if they know they're going to have to show it to other people, they stick to what they're good at. They find a subject matter that they are comfortable with. They dig in. There's also the risk there of doing things like using art that already has been drawn that they've done in the past. I mean, it creates a bad scenario. So we decided early on, me and a bunch of other concept artists that I talked to, that we wanted students to be collaborating on the same project. And that kind of like dominoes falling in reverse, they created a scenario where well, if we're going to do that, we need a project. We need to make up something. So something I incredibly enjoy about the class is prior to class, there's a ton of coordination with industry people for what they're going to do on guest lectures, but I also have done things like established a relationship with Bruce Nesmith, who's a retired game designer from Bethesda. And he was the lead designer on huge titles like Oblivion and these things that have just shipped millions and millions of units. And I go to him with a complete narrative that I've developed for the course. It's got characters, it's got a game world, it's got environments. And he, from that narrative, develops text prompts. Those text prompts are effectively the assignments, meaning that the students select those prompts based on what they would like to pursue, be it environment art or character art. They can mix it up if they want to. And they have to create art that aligns with the text, which is pretty close to what you get in a game development scenario. This isn't something where any game studio in the world is going to go to the concept art team and be like, what do you guys want to draw? Do you guys just want to make a game? You guys do it. Just you pick. No, it's always like, we've done some analysis. We have a good idea. We think we found a good, a window that we can work in the industry. Not everybody else is working on this type of game, and we think we're going to go for it. We've tested the idea. Now we've hired writers. We have game designers, and now we're going to the artist. So you have to give them something to draw. And that also, from the teaching perspective, it means that I can, in a very binary way, say these are the words you were meant to represent. This is what you've handed in as your assignment, and regardless of your skill set as an artist. The hard part is to align with the text. And that's the challenge. But the fun part is there's a game world to build. And by the end of it, we are fighting in the classroom about no, the character wouldn't do that because they did this over here. Or, no, you can't do that because there's no oxygen in that part of the facility. I mean, it's that sort of thing where if you drop them into something that is somewhat of like a design ecosystem, it is easier for them to find something that they can grasp onto that they actually care about.
Yeah, no, that's what I love about the class is this idea of you're going to unify the class and all the students and yourself and the guests and visitors around this hypothetical or pretend. I mean, it becomes real that we're working on the same new video game idea together. And even in the syllabus, you talk about, okay, 90% of the time I'm wearing my professor-teacher hat, but 10% of the time I'm the lead for this game that we're developing.
Art director.
I'm art director for this game.
Which is a real role in the industry.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's just brilliant. And how about the impact on the students? I mean, and then just some of the work they've produced. I mean, in the end, impact for those students in that class.
I think it went great, obviously, but But the students provided feedback at the end of the process. Half of the enrollees gave feedback. There was certainly some areas, that the class can grow in, but it was by and large extremely positive. And based on their work, the class was given the green light to be taught again.
Yeah.
And based on the enrollment and the attention it's getting in the fall semester, it's going to expand from what it is now, which is an 8-week course, to a full 16-week course, which is a phenomenal opportunity. But the students last semester, many of them were not, in particular, were not art majors, but they were not all comfortable with rendering, with making art. And for many of them, they hadn't done it in quite some time. And they were brave. They were making art that was going to be shown in front of their peers. That was shown in front of industry professionals. We had an official critique at the end of it, and we brought in a concept artist named Mike May, who works at ZeniMax Studios and has worked as a concept artist for 25 years, and he walked through their work with me. Yeah. And that is that's harrowing if you are doing something and it involves a skill set that you have not spent the majority of your time in your life. Yeah. And they were amazing. So I was incredibly impressed and honored that they ran with what was effectively something I just made up. I know all video games are just kind of made up until they're not, but yeah, they just ran with it, and they didn't complain, and they engaged, and it was a huge honor to have that time with them. Yeah,
and I know you had shared with me earlier. I think some of your industry folks talking about the art the students produced. Yeah. They were quite impressed, is what I heard.
Yeah, I always call people to thank them after they help out with the class. But we had a conversation about one student where Mike, the gentleman who helped with the final critique, said, like, so-and-so was just ready for industry based not even on like all of the work, just based on this one slice of it. The student in particular, like, just got it. And that is so much of what we're trying to do, is to put students in a position where they get it, where they understand how concept art fits into the broader game development pipeline, how what its value is, what their role is relative to the needs of the people before them in the pipeline and after them in the pipeline. And that is difficult to do in a classroom setting, but it's a heck of a lot easier if you're walking them through a project and you're saying, the reason you're doing this is because this artwork, which is just a class assignment to you, is in our theoretical scenario being passed to these other people. And by the way, next week, one of those people who works at Bungie is visiting and is going to tell you exactly why it matters and why you should do your job well. That kind of a thing is a lot more impactful than treating it as a purely academic process.
Yeah, it's kind of the ultimate compliment, because you set up this neat environment, and then in any class, and then the students surprise you in a good way.
And that's what you want.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what you want.
Like, what I want is students who are better artists than me, that are better at ideation and generating ideas, but I want to show them that they're better than I am through proving it with work. And that is, putting work in front of people is very, very difficult. And then obviously, having a class and saying you have to do this assignment, I'm going to grade you on it. Yeah. Like, that is a scenario that can result in something that's not great. And then what we're trying to do is blow their minds. And we did have a student that came to me at the end of the class and basically said, like, I was not even considering art. Art was not on the table. But she was talented, and I was thrilled to hear that she was at least scratching her head wondering how art was going to fit into her career and her life going forward.
Yeah. I love that. And then thinking of the future of the course and where you're going, just talk a little bit about your hopes for the future and how the course might go.
I'm in growth mode, absolutely. I'm learning a lot of things. There's a lot of opportunity for me to get better at a lot of stuff. But the 16-week opportunity is going to be huge because we can dig in. The 8-week course we had last semester only met 7 times. Having the opportunity to have that full 16 some odd weeks is going to mean more world building. It means more industry guests. It means we can dig into, like, if you're going to create a character, you need to consider how to represent that character in a way that is respectful to all of the design topics and the aesthetics and the cultures that are being represented in that character. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to do the right thing in a more structured and cohesive way.
I love that. Michael, thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Such a good class. I am going to go back in time and take the class. Maybe I'll just audit the class as an old guy.
You would be welcome. That'd be great.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate the time.